going to Doctor of History, he's also an economist, Webster Tarpley. If you have not watched Obama Deception and Fall of the Republic, two films I made back-to-back, we predicted everything Obama would do. That film was basically done when he got elected, or when he got sworn in. It came out like a month after he got sworn in. It's more powerful than when we made it because of Webster Tarpley and other economists like George Humphrey laying out exactly what was going to happen. This is like you're running the Titanic at full steam right towards an iceberg. You know it's not going to be good. And the oligarchs have figured out this rationale of austerity is sexy, post-industrial world. They planned the whole thing out. Greenspan says, don't worry, we'll just print our way out of this. He told CNBC that. That means hyperinflation on one end. But if you don't print, then the economy stalls. So what do? Well, you continue to print money, and you have zero credit, zero interest, total credit to the population, real businesses. You don't just hand hundreds of trillions of dollars over to the globalists to do whatever they want. And so that's what's happening. Everything is going into the hands of the banking cartel that engineered this. And just like Greece, just like Ireland, the more we bail them out, the more money we give to the zombie banks, the worse things get. And again, the economy is in an absolute free fall route right now. I'll be giving you those numbers as we talk to Dr. Tarpley here. China is saying it's the end of the dollar. The world is moving away from the dollar quickly. They're talking about now that the downgrade's beginning, that the U.S. is basically technically defaulting, and they're reporting that hundreds of cities, towns, counties, states, dozens of states are on the verge of going completely bankrupt. But this is all fraudulent bankruptcy because 90+% of the debt is induced debt that we were signed onto by the Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan mafia that put their politicians in the House, Senate, and, of course, the Obama administration. Bush passed the baton over to them. And so no one is really debating the elephant in the room except for people like Dr. Tarpley. And we predicted it all 100%. Said within 2 to 3 years this would happen in Obama Deception, Fall of the Republic. Here we are 2.5, 3 years later. Webster Tarpley, thank you for joining us.
Alex, how you doing?
I'm not doing too good. I live here. I love my family. I'm watching these criminals sit up there. Geithner saying we would never lose our AAA rating, knowing full well once they got the Super Congress in, they were going to bring us deeper into receivership. Tarpley, welcome.
Thank you. Well, this is what we talked about. It's a depression. It is a breakdown crisis. It's a disintegration of the entire system, not just a collapse of prices, but institutions that cease to exist all over the place. Right now, there's a whiff of panic, right? It just crashed through minus 400 on the Dow. Let's go back to last week. We had this crisis around the debt ceiling. I regarded this crisis as totally unnecessary, reckless, irresponsible. We had a lot of wild talk from ideologues about how the U.S. could default. It wouldn't matter. That is very foolish. The U.S. Treasury securities are the bedrock of the economy of this entire planet. It's not a good system. I don't like this system, but I wouldn't say junk the system and then go off the cliff. I don't think that's good policy. So what happened last week was this fear about the U.S. default drove a lot of people to dump government bonds around the world. That would be especially Italian bonds, because Italy had been under attack since about July 11th, Spanish bonds and other bonds, along with U.S. bonds to some extent, but not that much. The money then flowed into Switzerland, Japan, and Germany, driving up their currencies and making their exports harder to buy. Not good for these countries either. They're very, very worried about it. So we had a situation where Italy and Spain were big targets. Now we've also got this European August vacation break. The volumes in the bond markets of Italy, Spain are quite low at this time of year. A perfect occasion for the hedge fund hyenas and the zombie bankers to come in and attack using credit default swaps. The Europeans had a chance last year to outlaw credit default swaps when Germany, Schäuble, the finance minister, talked about it. They decided not to do that. They also talked about having a Tobin tax, a turnover tax on these finance oligarchs. They didn't do that. So they were sitting there pretty much exposed to the attack. And that then got these Spanish and Italian bonds going down. That, in turn, raises the issue, well, maybe the euro will blow up, and then, of course, the dollar might also blow up in some combination. What you then saw was a lot of European banks were going to the brink. If you look at Commerzbank of Germany, you look at Société Générale of France, Barclays of Britain, and some others, these banks are under a lot of pressure. A lot of European institutions are dumping U.S. stocks, and they're also dumping futures contracts in the oil market. The reason that oil is going down has a lot to do with the fact that price is mostly speculation. And when the speculators get in trouble, they got to liquidate their positions to get into cash. So that's sort of the technical side of it. Now, in the middle of this, Standard & Poor's, the fact that this institution even exists today is a tribute to the impotence of the whole, what can we say, criminal justice system.
They have been transferred by the big banks who basically set these groups up. They've been transferred the power of Congress actually rating itself, so it creates the false idea that oligarchical bankers set the destiny and the credit and faith of your country. Right. Are they not really the true dictators now of our country, S&P, Moody's, and others, who are made up of a revolving door of the big six zombie bank executives?
Exactly. I was thinking this morning when I heard that Standard & Poor's was making ultimatums again to the United States. Standard & Poor's this morning says, we may downgrade you again, so watch out. And we demand immediate fiscal action. In other words, we demand genocidal budget cuts. My God.
They demand shock therapy. Never cut the trillions the bankers are stealing. Never prosecute themselves for the derivatives fraud. Cut your Social Security. And again, it's a fiat economy. It is a dependency economy. But once you're into that, it's the only economy you have. Even as Ron Paul has said, you'd have to phase out of this stuff over decades. You cut all of these safety nets out, we will go into a total road warrior depression instantly, with riots in the streets, with 45 to 50 million people on food stamps. And what is S&P and others saying? They're openly saying slash it all, which is known as the IMF riot in their own documents, where they want the riots to begin to further cause absolute destruction of any institution, so the banks can then come in behind it and literally set up mercenary warlords and fully conquer us.
I would say my feeling this morning was the ratings agencies are acting like Hitler. They're basically, Hitler used to say, this is my last territorial demand in Europe. And S&P says, well, this is my last demand for genocidal austerity for this month. It's time to fight back. The United States is under attack. That's the only way to look at this. This is now political. The gesture by S&P is completely political. And if the other ratings agencies, now we've got two more Damocles swords. We've got Fitch and we've got Moody's. What are they going to do? I think it's time to investigate these entities. What are their conflicts of interest? How many of them are shorting U.S. Treasury bonds? How many of them have relatives who are shorting
insider trading.
Treasury bonds? Exactly, insider trading. If those guys that you saw from S&P on all the television shows yesterday, if they were talking about stocks, if they were telling you to buy a stock, then they'd have to put up a chart that says, does this analyst own the stock? Do relatives own the stock? Do they provide services? Are they shorting? All the rest of this stuff. Somehow, these people seem to be above the law. S&P runs wild. The Treasury, and I think they're right, Geithner says they made a $2 trillion error. If they make a $2 trillion error, where's the accountability? What are they going to say? Too bad if you lost your life savings. We're sorry.
But that's just a dance they're doing. Geithner's totally controlled by the very same crew, as you know, Webster, expanding on that.
But he's telling you the truth, that their analysis is worthless. Now, just think back to 2008. Those same ratings agencies, the three that we're talking about, they were giving AAA ratings to every piece of toxic derivative junk in Wall Street up until 5 seconds before, the ultimate bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers or whatever.
Yeah, that was the sucker play. Now they're in the implosion angle, and that leads me to my next question. 3 weeks ago, you talked, because you read Italian, speak Italian, that they were subpoenaing Moody's and S&P in Italy. Now we read last Friday that they did raid them, and so you're saying that's the same thing here. Raid their hind ends now.
Yes, exactly. Get the the FBI going, get the Department of Justice. The Secret Service, I think, still works for the Treasury, or could. There's got to be an immediate investigation, and the only way to do that is you've got to determine, is there a criminal conspiracy going on involving various hedge fund operators who are in collusion with these agencies.
And by the way, Webster, this is a big deal for those that don't know. This is one of the biggest things we've seen in decades. The fact that for the first time in modern history we're being downgraded, that means now that it's going to spread as a contagion to states, counties, and cities, and already has. So the very same hedge fund hyenas can now loan these counties and states and cities back citizen banker bailout money at exorbitant interest prices.
Right. They're driving. This is basically a conspiracy to raise the interest rates. In other words, to gouge the American people more. Right now here in the Washington area, right, everybody in Virginia and Maryland is waiting because we were told already by the ratings agencies that if the U.S. Treasury debt is downgraded, since Virginia and Maryland depend so much on the federal budget because of the nature of the regional economy, that the Maryland and Virginia bonds will also be downgraded. I think they're both AAA. But what are we talking about? The current situation is a dictatorship. It looks like this. At the top of the dictatorship, we have the triumvirate of S&P, Fitch, and Moody's. And they hand down their decisions. They say, we demand $4 trillion of genocidal budget cuts. We demand more budget cuts. Then those orders are going to go to the 12 tyrants. That's the super committee or the super Congress. I call them the 12 tyrants, a good term drawn from Greek and Egyptian history. The 12 tyrants, and we're getting some word about who they might turn out to be, the 12 tyrants are going to report around Thanksgiving, and then between Thanksgiving and December, Christmas basically, the Congress is going to be forced to vote on this. This is modeled on the BRAC, the Base Realignment and Closing Committee, although it's a qualitatively different level of operations, because this is now running the entire economy. You look at the BRAC.
Before it was just they were deciding what bases to close. Now this is all the spending and cutting bills not coming out of the House and individual members. It's coming out of the Committee of 12 with Obama as the 13th.
Right, and this will be a secret committee. You know, in Venice they had the Council of 10, right? The Council of 10 was the hated and feared secret intelligence agency of the Venetians. This is now the Council of 12. And the idea is that they're going to come up with their list of genocidal budget cuts, and it'll be take it or leave it. Look at what the BRAC did. Last week, we had a tragic event here in Washington, D.C. Walter Reed Army Hospital, which was the best facility in the world if you had paraplegics coming in, people who had lost arms, legs, limbs in the various wars. It's a tragedy, of course, but Walter Reed Army Hospital had developed the very best team in the world in terms of getting those guys back on the path to recovery. Now that entire hospital has been shut down. It's destroyed. They say they're moving it to Bethesda Naval Medical Center. It just won't be the same. And it also means that there's one fewer hospital in the District of Columbia, where the district has been losing hospitals continuously. Now, what the 12 tyrants are going to do, they will do the same thing to the U.S. economy that the BRAC did to Walter Reed Army Hospital. And it is. And
imagine what the lobbyists will do. Imagine the power. We're already seeing Obama give health care waivers to his friends and GEs exempt from carbon taxes. Imagine the power this gives the oligarchy. Now they're not having to buy off 500 members of the House and Senate of the Congress. Now they just go to 12 super tyrants. And now we learn it was never about raising the debt limit. It was all about getting this agreement for the crisis that they were about to stage.